Take a group of 7 adult siblings, ages 40 to 55, presenting to a clinician with drastically different psychological profiles. One operates with high-functioning, rigid perfectionism, while another struggles with severe somatic illness and chronic dissociation. Between 1970 and 1987, all 7 siblings were raised in the same highly secretive, coercive household. Clinical assumptions often predict that a shared abusive environment will leave a uniform trauma footprint across siblings. This prediction fails by treating the childhood environment as a static, unchanging background. A family functions as an operating system that evolves, tests boundaries, and normalizes distortions in rules and emotional reality over time. To understand these diverging outcomes, we must look to the Phase Shift Sibling Model. Within this model, birth order determines the chronological maturity of the abusive system at the moment each child enters it. A child entering the household in 1970 encounters a completely different psychological architecture than a child born into the consolidated system of 1987. Analyzing long-term traumatic outcomes requires us to move past isolated abuse events and model the chronological evolution of the family's governing structure. The systemic architecture begins with the enabling conditions created by a dominant patriarchal authority figure. During a grooming phase, coercive control gradually erodes boundaries and bodily autonomy, often masking the intrusion as religious discipline or protection. A non-protective parent stabilizes this emerging system through a process of accommodation. Accommodation occurs when a parent minimizes abuse or enforces secrecy to prevent the total collapse of the family unit and the resulting social ostracization. The system is further fortified by external cultural vectors, specifically honor-based reputation management. The cultural mandate to veil family sins, or sutra, can be weaponized to frame the outside world as a threat to family honor. This creates a closed loop where external oversight is physically removed and internal disclosure is psychologically mapped as treason. Inside this closed loop, children are governed by the biological necessity of dependency. The child relies entirely on the father for physiological survival, including food and shelter. This dependency exists alongside systemic terror emanating from that same source. This creates the fright without solution paradox. The biological drive to flee danger is blocked because flight would mean losing the primary source of survival. To maintain the attachment, the developing mind may employ structural dissociation. The mind bifurcates into apparently normal parts for public function and emotional parts that compartmentalize and hold the trauma privately. Disorganized attachment functions as a survival adaptation. The child must structurally fracture their own identity to maintain a lethal attachment bond. This timeline maps the chronological maturity of the family system over 17 years. The x-axis tracks the years, while the y-axis tracks systemic consolidation and rigidity. Household systems typically emerge in a stepwise sequence, establishing control first before refining rules and internalizing self-policing mechanisms. The eldest daughter entered this system in 1970, while it was still in its raw formation phase. Because the structure was still unformed, she carried the early organizing burden, which frequently leads to severe parentification. Her adult presentation likely includes dismissive avoidant attachment, hyper-responsibility, and the role of the deputy. The middle daughters enter as the system's rules normalize and solidify along this middle incline. The family maintains stability through role allocation. The system assigns distinct functions, the appeaser, the lost child, the truth teller, or the mascot, to individual siblings. This distribution of trauma prevents sibling coalition building, ensuring they cannot unite against the father. Role allocation protects the system. No single child holds the full burden or possesses the complete narrative of the abuse. The sibling structure contains a specific anomaly, the arrival of the only son in 1978. In a conservative household, his position is unique. He is a minority in number, but is granted a majority of the power. This dynamic sets the stage for lateral betrayal. Grooming the son as the successor requires him to enforce the father's rules on his sisters, driving avoidant and externalizing traits. The final entry point is the youngest daughter in 1987, at the peak of the curve's rigidity. She is born into a fully functional, highly normalized abusive machine where the mother and older siblings are already compliant. Her adult presentation often includes fearful avoidant attachment and the role of the eternal child, as the abuse felt like an immutable law of nature. This mature phase of the abusive machine creates the deepest disorganized identity, effectively stripping the child of a baseline for normality. By midlife, right between the ages of 40 and 55, the deep systemic effects have branched out into stable adult realities. Without intervention, unresolved trauma from this architecture tends to consolidate rather than fade away. These adults often maintain a high-functioning public persona while experiencing private emotional dysregulation. This closed-loop system carries a high risk of intergenerational transmission. This transmission is driven by repetition compulsion. Surviving siblings may become emotionally unavailable ghosts to their own children, or become hyper-controlling in an attempt to prevent their past from replicating. The legacy of long-term family trauma persists through a self-reinforcing governing architecture that imprints its blueprint onto every child who enters it.